They'll swear they've moved on. They'll smile like they're free. They'll post like they've leveled up and speak as if you were just a passing cloud. But my friends, the silence doesn't mean peace. It means pressure. It means denial. Because people don't run from what doesn't matter. They run from what still pulls on them, and when someone mentions your name in the room, they freeze, even if it's just for a second. The mask stays on, but the eyes give it away. Your name is no longer just your name. It's a reflection of the version of them they buried when they lost you, and whether they admit it or not, they haven't been the same since. Let's be real here. Most folks pretend not to care, because that's easier than owning the damage they caused. It's easier than confessing that you were the one thing that challenged their comfort. You were the lesson they weren't ready for. You see, you didn't just walk into their life. You exposed their emotional ceiling. You held up a mirror. And let me tell you something. Most people don't like what they see in the mirror when you're the one holding it. They weren't ready to love at your level. So they chose the easy path. Reject it, run from it, lie to themselves, and call it healing. But healing doesn't look like performance. Healing doesn't flinch when your name is spoken out loud. That name, your name, carries weight now. It's a trigger. It's the start of an internal war they've tried to silence. You represent a road not taken, a door they closed too soon. And the truth is, they hear about you more than you think. In conversations they're not ready for, in stories from mutual friends, in places you used to walk together. You've become part of their emotional architecture. And folks, let me tell you, when you're part of someone's blueprint, tearing you out only creates cracks in the walls. They might paint over them, but eventually the cracks show. And that's what your name does now. It exposes the damage. People like to pretend they're unbothered because being honest means admitting weakness. It means confessing that they miss your voice, your presence, your energy. But this is Stoicism. We don't need their confessions. We just watch the patterns, the flinching, the forced laughter, the sudden change in tone when you're brought up. That's all the proof we need. When someone's moved on, your name is just a name. But when they haven't, your name is a grenade. Quiet until it lands. And it always lands. No matter how far they run, your name catches up. So listen, my friends, don't chase closure. Don't beg for validation. Stay calm. Stay rooted. Because your silence is not just silence, it's pressure, it's power, and they feel it more than they'll ever show. When someone has to pretend not to care, they already lost the game. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything. The universe handles that part. All you have to do is become the version of yourself they could never reach. That's the real punishment. That's the real reward. So don't fold now. Don't sit there wondering if you were ever enough. You weren't just enough. You were the edge they couldn't walk, the depth they couldn't handle, the real thing in a world full of counterfeits. You didn't lose them, my friend. They lost the one version of life that had meaning. And that loss, it echoes louder over time. You may not hear it yet, but trust me, when the fake laughter dies down and the distractions fade, your name will hit them like a truth bomb they can't defuse. Because your name doesn't remind them of love. They can find that anywhere. It reminds them of the truth, and truth stings harder than heartbreak. If you felt that, if you know deep down that you left a mark they can't erase, don't just sit in silence. Say it out loud. Claim it. Own it. Go down to the comments right now and type, "My name is a trigger." Not for attention, not for pity, but as a declaration that you were the lesson, the wake-up call, the one they fumbled. Make it known that you've stopped chasing and started owning your gravity. Press that like button. Subscribe if this just lit something inside you. Stay close. I'm not done speaking life into you yet. You are calm. You are the storm. You are the silence that speaks loudest. Remember, power doesn't ask for attention. It leaves echoes. Say it again. My name is a trigger. Number 1. Your name equals emotional code word, not just a name anymore. They might laugh when someone says your name. They might raise their eyebrows like it means nothing. They might even throw in a joke, roll their eyes, or shrug you off like you were just a bump in the road. But what they show on the outside, it's not the whole story, not even close, because what they don't show, the pause before the laugh, the change in their tone, the tightening in their jaw, that's where the real truth lives. That's where your name does its work. Quiet, psychological, immediate. You see, folks, a name is never just a name. Not once it's been wired into the nervous system. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Your name, it lives in their unconscious now, and every time it comes up in conversation, it doesn't just remind them of you. It unlocks something they've tried to bury, something raw, confusing, and unfinished. That's why they flinch, not because they hate you, not because they don't care, but because your name holds an entire scene they've tried to erase. Your voice, your eyes, the way they felt when they thought they were winning your love, or when they were losing it. You've been emotionally imprinted into them, and no contact doesn't delete code. It just pushes it deeper into the system, where it waits, silently, until the right trigger brings it back. Think of it like this. Imagine a soldier who hears a loud bang and drops to the ground before even thinking. That's not logic. That's emotional memory. The body responds before the mind can explain why. Now, apply that to love. Apply that to you. When someone says your name, they don't just remember you, they re-experience you. The intensity, the vulnerability, the guilt, the regret, the things they said but didn't mean, the feelings they never said out loud but still carry, and all of it, every ounce of it, comes flooding back in the space of a single breath. This isn't nostalgia. It's not, "Oh, I remember them." No, this is deeper. This is emotional code cracking, anchored emotion imprinting. It's a psychological mechanism where the human brain links a certain name, scent, sound, or memory to a surge of feeling. And once that connection is made, it's not easily undone. Your name became a button, not a soft one, not a romantic one, a powerful one, a button that lights up everything they've avoided feeling. Ever wonder why it seems like they overreact when you're brought up? Why they suddenly change the topic, get defensive, or act like it never mattered? That's because your name isn't neutral. It carries energy. It carries truth, and truth disrupts the illusions people build to stay in control. They don't want your name to be spoken, not because they're over you, but because they aren't. Your name pokes holes in their storyline. They've told themselves they were right to walk away. They've convinced themselves they didn't feel as much as they did. But when your name is mentioned, the armor cracks, just a little, but enough to let the memory through. The mind will always try to make sense of emotions after the fact, but the body knows first. The heart knows before the brain can come up with an excuse. And the moment your name enters the room, their nervous system gets flooded. The breath shortens, the skin warms, the thoughts scramble. That's what happens when someone still holds a story about you that they haven't been brave enough to read all the way through. Now you might ask, but why won't they just admit it? Why not just say they miss me, or that I mattered? because facing the truth would mean owning how badly they handled it. It would mean standing in front of the mirror and admitting that they messed up something real, and not everyone has the emotional maturity to face that kind of responsibility. Some folks would rather run from the button than press it. They fear what it would reveal, not about you, but about themselves. You're no longer just a person to them. You're a moment in time they keep trying to edit. But life doesn't let us rewrite our emotional history just because it makes us uncomfortable, and that's why you still show up. That's why your name still lingers. You are a symbol now, a lesson that still haunts the classroom even after the bell rang. So what do you do with this? You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't shrink. You become still, you become unbothered, because you, my friend, are the living proof that depth still exists in a world obsessed with surface. You were real in a space that wasn't ready, and that kind of impact doesn't fade. It lingers, it returns, it triggers. So hold your head high today. If they flinch when they hear your name, that's not your problem. That's your power. It means your presence did what most people only dream of. It stuck. And you didn't have to scream. You didn't have to plead. You just were. And that was more than enough. Type it in the comments. I am the button. Say it like you mean it. Say it because you know you left a mark. Say it because your presence rewired the room. Say it because it's true. Number 2, they've built a persona that can't publicly want you. Some folks don't just walk away from you, they build a whole new identity on top of it. They don't just leave you behind, they reinvent themselves as the one who didn't care, who wasn't that into it, or who had to move on for their peace. And the longer they live inside that story, the harder it becomes to step out of it, because coming back to you now wouldn't just mean reaching out. It would mean tearing down the version of themselves they've been selling to everyone else. They didn't just reject you, my friend. They built a persona around the rejection. They crafted a narrative where they were the one who saw it clearly, who made the right choice, who outgrew the connection. And now that time has passed, they're stuck inside that performance. To admit they miss you, that they still feel something, that would unravel the whole thing. It would embarrass them in front of the audience they've been performing for. Friends, family, even new partners. It would expose their pride for what it really was, fear dressed up as logic. This is what I call narrative dissonance, the inner war that happens when someone publicly detaches from a person they privately can't stop thinking about. It's not just emotional anymore, it's psychological, it's identity-based. They've welded your absence into their self-image, and now they can't figure out how to walk it back without looking weak, foolish, or exposed. So what do? They fake peace. They fake healing. They double down on the act. But don't be fooled by the show. It takes a lot of energy to keep a lie alive, especially a lie about not caring. That's why they avoid your name. That's why they get uncomfortable when someone brings you up. That's why they throw shade at you in subtle ways, because the persona demands it. They have to protect the mask at all costs. If they smile when they hear your name, the mask cracks. If they admit you were good to them, the mask slips. If they say they miss you, the mask shatters. And yet, deep down, you still live in them, not because they want to admit it, but because they can't erase it. You challenged them. You got too close. You made them feel vulnerable in a way that no performance can replace. That version of themselves, the raw one, the open one, they left it with you. And now all they have is the persona, a curated image with no soul behind it. Let's make one thing clear. It's not your job to fix this for them. It's not your job to wait for them to grow up and come clean. Your job is to understand the truth. They didn't stop feeling, they just started faking. And faking is exhausting. Eventually, the act wears thin. Eventually, the people around them notice the gaps. Eventually, even they start to crack under the pressure of pretending you were meaningless. This is why they watch your stories from fake accounts. This is why they still ask mutual friends how you're doing, but only when no one's listening. Because the persona might say, "I don't want them," but the soul whispers something else entirely. And the soul never lies. The ego is loud. But the soul is honest. So don't mistake silence for indifference. It's just fear wearing a suit. Fear of being seen without the character they created. Fear of being vulnerable again. Fear of admitting they were wrong. You, on the other hand, don't need a persona. You stood in truth. You loved real. You showed up with nothing but your heart, and they couldn't match it. That's not weakness. That's power. You're not pretending. You're not performing. You are free. Write it in the comments. I don't need a persona, because you never had to fake being enough. You just were. Number 3. The reputation of missing you is worse than the reality. In today's dating world, folks fear one thing more than being heartbroken, looking like they were. Somewhere along the way, missing someone became a sign of failure. Wanting someone who walked away started getting labeled as weak, desperate, or emotionally messy. So instead of facing the reality of their own feelings, they cover them up with false peace, curated detachment, and a carefully constructed image that screams, "I'm fine without them." Not because they are fine, but because the reputation of missing you is far more threatening to their pride than the truth itself. You see, it's not that they don't think about you. It's that admitting it would cost them everything they built around denying it. In the quiet of their mind, they miss the way your energy calmed them down. They miss how deeply you saw them without judgment. But to say that out loud, that would unravel the illusion. It would make them look soft. Worse, it would make them look like they were wrong. And some people would rather live with emotional emptiness than admit they made a bad call. That's not strength. That's fear dressed in bravado. This is the fear of looking emotionally defeated, not being defeated, but appearing to be. It's a performance, and like all performances, it needs an audience. So they keep showing up, keep pretending they've moved on, keep playing the role. Because what would people say if they knew? What would their new partner think? What would their friends say if they confessed that they still wake up wondering if you're thinking of them too? And let's talk about those friends for a second. They see it, they hear it in the silence, in the way your name comes up and the energy shifts, in the way they get defensive or oddly quiet. The ones closest to them know the truth, even if it's never spoken. Some of them respect it, some even pity them. Because everyone can see the truth they're trying to hide. You were not forgettable. In fact, forgetting you is the one thing they haven't been able to do, no matter how hard they've tried. But here's the real kicker. They're not just afraid of what others will say. They're afraid of what you might think, that if they reach out, you'll see them as weak, that you'll believe they couldn't move on, that maybe you'll reject them back. So they avoid the risk. They hold the emotion in like a loaded weapon, afraid it might go off. And that's why they'll act like they've erased you. It's not indifference, it's emotional self-protection. In their world, missing someone who tried hard is the ultimate admission of guilt. It forces them to admit that someone showed up with real love and they fumbled it. That's not an easy truth to carry. So instead, they rewrite the story. They tell themselves you cared too much, that you were too emotional, that you loved too deeply. But folks, don't let that trick fool you, because underneath the pride is pain. And pride, when it's protecting unspoken grief, turns into silence, cold, sharp silence. And you were the one thing that broke through the noise. You were the calm in their storm, the presence that made them feel seen, even if they couldn't admit it. You didn't need to perform, you just were, and that's what unsettled them the most, because while they've been busy protecting their ego, you've been living in truth. So if they never say your name, don't assume it's because they don't care. Sometimes the most deafening silence is the one wrapped in shame. And the most powerful love stories are the ones people can't talk about, because they know they were the ones who ruined it. Write it in the comments. I was never forgettable. Say it with your chest, because even in silence, your presence echoes louder than their pride. Number 4. You exposed their emotional ceiling. Some people don't run because you hurt them. They run because you made them feel something too real, too intense, too fast. You didn't just offer love, you offered depth. You cracked open a level of intimacy they had never trained for. And instead of rising up to meet you at that level, they bailed. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it was too much of the real thing. You exposed their emotional ceiling, and that's where everything changed. They thought they were ready. They thought they could handle connection. They liked the idea of love, the aesthetic of closeness, the comfort of attention, but they weren't prepared for the weight of being truly seen. And that's exactly what you did. You saw beneath their defense mechanisms. You heard the pain in their silences. You didn't just touch their body. You touched the version of them they hide from everyone. And when that version of them started to come to the surface, panic set in. What you triggered in them has a name: emotional altitude syndrome. It's what happens when someone's heart is dragged to a height it was never conditioned to breathe in. The air gets thin, the mind starts spinning, the feelings get overwhelming. And the easiest thing to do? Retreat, get back to the ground, go find someone simpler, someone who doesn't challenge their emotional limits, someone who keeps it light, casual, safe. That's why nothing they've entered since you feels like much. The new people, the new flings, the easy vibes, they all feel like paper after holding fire. They smile, they post, they play pretend, but deep down, there's a dullness they can't explain. Their heart knows what's missing, even if their mouth stays quiet, because you were the one that pulled them up, too high, too fast, too real. And you might be wondering, but why didn't they just try? Why not communicate, grow, rise with me? The truth is, most people think they're ready for deep love until it arrives. They imagine it's all passion and peace, but then it shows up as accountability, as vulnerability, as someone asking, why are you scared to open up? And that's when their emotional training runs out. They're not bad people. They're just unequipped. But instead of saying, this is hard, they say, you're too much. Let me tell you something, my friend. You were never too much. You were just the first person who refused to live in the shallow end with them. And when someone spent their whole life treading emotional water, the ocean of your presence feels terrifying. Not because it's dangerous, but because it demands surrender. And surrender to someone who's built walls their whole life feels like death, not love. So now they try to replicate the feeling in situations that don't have the altitude, but it doesn't hit the same, and it never will, because you can't replace real depth with artificial attention. You can't swap soul with surface, and even if they never admit it to you or to anyone, that ache they carry, that quiet dissatisfaction, that's you. That's the echo of a connection they weren't ready to explore but can't forget. You became the measuring stick, the standard, the moment where they saw what intimacy could be, and then let it slip away. But here's what matters. You don't need to shrink just because they couldn't breathe at your altitude. Don't come down to meet people who are afraid of heights. Stay high, stay deep. Because eventually someone built for that elevation will find you. And they won't run. Type it in the comments. I am not too much. Because you were never too intense. You were just too real for someone still afraid of being seen. Number 5. Their coping strategy: outperform you publicly. You've seen it. The sudden glow-up, the constant posts, the over-the-top stories with new people, fake peace captions, and an endless stream of "look how happy I am" content. At first glance, it might seem like they're doing great, like they moved on and found better. But slow down, my friend. Don't fall for the performance. What you're witnessing isn't healing, it's a strategy. A public strategy to convince the world they're over you, while they're privately battling a truth they can't admit. Your silence didn't go unnoticed. It lit a fire under their ego, and now they're in damage control. This is what I call competitive healing, a subconscious attempt to win the breakup by appearing healed, evolved, and unbothered before you do. It's not about peace. It's not about growth. It's about optics, because in their mind, whoever looks happier wins. But here's the irony. They're not trying to feel better. They're trying to look better, especially in your absence, especially when they can't read your mind anymore, especially when you're no longer reacting. You see, when you went quiet, when you didn't chase, didn't clap back, didn't fall apart in public, that terrified them, because they expected you to unravel. They expected you to beg. And when you didn't, that messed with their entire sense of control. Your silence became a mirror. It made them ask, wait, did I lose something real? And instead of sitting with that question, they buried it under distractions, edits, and applause from strangers. So what do they do instead? They flood the timeline with distractions. They flirt publicly, laugh loudly, and chase validation like it's oxygen. They aren't trying to move on. They're trying to compete. Because you're no longer part of their audience, they're trying to win back the stage. But here's the truth, folks. Healing doesn't need a front row. Healing happens in the shadows. It happens in quiet reflection. And that's why their version feels so loud. It has to be. Because if it ever went silent, they'd hear the echo of what they lost. Ask yourself this. If someone's truly at peace, do they need to prove it? Real peace is private. It doesn't post every highlight. It doesn't need 10 stories a day to feel seen. So why are they doing all this? Because deep down, they're not celebrating. They're compensating, and the person they're trying hardest to convince isn't even the followers, it's themselves. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Right now, their unconscious is steering the wheel, and that's why every new fling looks like an act. That's why every caption sounds like a script. They don't realize it yet, but they're grieving the role you used to play, not just in their life, but in how they saw themselves. You were their emotional mirror, and without that mirror, they're scrambling for an identity. You didn't perform. You didn't race to show the world a new version of yourself. You let the silence speak. That takes power. That takes real internal strength. And that's why they feel the need to outshine you publicly. Because privately, they know they can't match your calm. So stay calm, stay silent, let them perform, because stages collapse when the applause fades, and when the crowd gets bored, they'll have to face what's left. No filters, no audience, just the truth. And the truth is, you won. Write it in the comments. I don't need to perform. Because healing isn't loud, it's real. And real doesn't need a stage. Number 6. Every social circle becomes a pressure chamber. You might think you've disappeared from their world, but trust me, you haven't, not even close, because every shared space, every mutual friend, every small coincidence still carries a shadow of you, and they feel it. It follows them like background noise they can't turn off. That's the thing about connection. It leaves echoes in places neither of you expect. They thought they could outrun you by deleting your number or unfollowing your page. But life has its way of looping back. And now every social circle they step into feels like a pressure chamber. One word about you, one small mention of your name, and the air gets heavy. You've become the ghost they can't uninvite. This is what I call social echo traps, those repeated, unplanned moments where your name, your image, or your energy finds its way back into their life. A friend brings you up casually, someone shows a photo, a place you both used to visit pops up in conversation. It's never direct, it's never loud, but it's constant, and every time it happens, it shakes the image they've been trying to maintain, that fake peace, that story that says they've moved on. Because pretending not to care only works when the world lets them forget. And the world, it keeps reminding them you still exist. They thought silence would make them safe, but silence doesn't erase energy. You're still part of their network, even if you're not part of their day. And now they live in quiet fear of being reminded of you again. That's why they avoid certain hangouts, skip conversations, or change topics too quickly. Their friends notice the shift. Their smile fades just a little too fast. Their tone hardens. It's not hatred, it's pressure. Because every mention of you threatens to collapse the version of themselves they've been trying to hold together. The funny part, their friends already know. They can see it. They see how your name still lands heavy in the room. They notice how the vibe changes, and even if no one says it out loud, they all know you're still in there. You're still part of their emotional DNA, even if they've tried to code you out. But that's the danger of pretending indifference. It demands constant maintenance, and the moment someone brings you up, that performance starts to fall apart. You might wonder why they don't just admit it, why they don't just say, yeah, I still think about them sometimes. It's pride, it's fear, it's that same inner war between who they really are and who they're pretending to be. Because once they admit they still care, the whole act crumbles. They'd have to face their choices, their guilt, their missed chances. And most people aren't built for that kind of honesty. So instead, they play defense by pretending every reminder of you means nothing when deep down it's everything. And let's be honest, my friend, you didn't ask to haunt them. You didn't force yourself into those circles. You simply existed. You moved on quietly, without noise, without revenge, and that silence gave you power. Because now, even without trying, your name carries more weight than their entire performance. Every echo of you reminds them of the emotional altitude they once touched, and the emptiness that replaced it. So don't worry about what's being said in those circles. Don't stress about who's mentioning your name or how they react. Every time you're brought up, it's another reminder that your energy still lives rent-free in their world. You've become a part of their story that refuses to fade, no matter how much they try to edit you out. Write it in the comments. I am the echo, because you are. And no matter how far they go, your presence still travels through every room, every circle, every silence. Number 7. They can't replace you because you were never just a person. You were never just a name in their contact list, never just a person they used to see. You were a chapter, an entire era that changed the rhythm of their life. That's why they can't replace you, not because no one else wants them, but because no matter who they stand beside now, it never feels the same. Because with you, it wasn't just romance, it was evolution. And deep down, they know it. They don't just miss you, they miss who they were when they were with you, that softer, more open version of themselves, the one that laughed easier, slept better, cared more. That version, the one that was vulnerable, alive, stretched by love, is gone. And try as they might, they haven't found it again. Because the truth is, you weren't just a person, you were a mirror, a compass, a guide into parts of themselves they hadn't explored before. And when they left, they didn't just walk away from you, they walked away from who they were becoming. This is era attachment, a deep, hidden longing for a version of life that felt fuller, not just because of the relationship, but because of the personal identity it shaped. You weren't just that girl or that guy. You were the environment their soul grew in. And that kind of connection doesn't fade when it ends. It lingers, it haunts, it sets the standard, not just for love, but for how alive they felt during it. That's why nothing works now, why every new person feels off, why they keep moving on but never feel moved by anyone. The new partners, their placeholders, nice backgrounds, scenery. But you were the story, you were the central plot, the spark that pushed them to think, to feel, to confront things they usually avoided. You were the one who cracked the shell, and yet they'll try to convince themselves it was just a phase, just a lesson, just something that didn't work out. Because it's easier to reduce something meaningful than to admit it left a hole. Admitting it would mean confessing that they lost a once-in-a-lifetime connection, not because it wasn't real, but because they weren't ready. And how do you explain that to someone else? How do you tell a new partner that you're still grieving a version of yourself you only knew with someone else? So they fake it, they smile, they post, they pretend that new is better. But behind those eyes is a hunger for something they can't recreate. Because you weren't just comfort, you were transformation. You forced them to grow emotionally, even if they didn't have the words for it back then. You saw them. You believed in their higher self, even while they were still stuck in their lower one. And now that version of life feels far away. You ever wonder why they still lurk? Still check in? Still bring you up in random conversations? Because they're not chasing you. They're chasing who they were with you. And that part of themselves isn't showing up anymore. It disappeared when you left. Let that settle for a moment. You didn't just change their love life. You changed their timeline. And no matter how much they try to rewrite the past, they know deep down nothing since you has hit the same. Write it in the comments. I was the era. Because you were. And eras don't come back. They become legends. Number 8. They'll come back. But this time, they'll be quiet. When they finally come back, and they will, it won't be dramatic. There won't be fireworks or apologies that sound like poetry. It'll be quiet. A simple message. A casual like on an old post, a sudden, "Hey, just checking in." But don't be fooled by the softness of their tone. That small action carries months of silent war inside them. It's not that they finally realized what they lost. It's that they finally got tired of pretending they didn't feel it. That's what happens when the walls they built start cracking. The truth leaks out, even when they swore it never would. This is what I call a psychological leak. The moment when repressed emotion slips through the cracks of self-control. They tried to unfeel you, my friend. They tried everything. New people, new hobbies, distractions, but none of it erased you, because you weren't just a memory. They built defenses around you, and now those defenses are breaking down. The act of indifference has become too heavy to carry. So a text, it's not random. It's the confession their pride couldn't voice. They might tell themselves it's nothing. Just wanted to say hi. Just checking if you're good. But that's not honesty. It's camouflage. They're not checking on you. They're checking if the door's still open. They want to see if you've really moved on, or if you're still that safe place they once took for granted. Deep down, they're terrified that you no longer care, that your silence isn't anger, it's closure. Because nothing scares the ego more than realizing the person they tried to forget actually did. You see, people can suppress emotion, but they can't delete it. Feelings don't vanish, they just wait. They hide under new routines, new faces, new smiles. But then something small, a scent, a song, your name in a passing conversation, pulls the thread, and everything unravels. They start dreaming about you again. They hear your laugh in someone else's. They replay old messages, and before they know it, their control slips. That's when the leak begins. The first text, the awkward reach-out, the quiet, "I miss this." It's not planned. It's reflex, because eventually truth demands oxygen. And here's the twist. They won't even understand why they're doing it. They'll tell themselves it's just curiosity, just closure. But beneath all that logic sits a truth they can't deny. No one else reached them the way you did. No one made them feel seen without needing to perform. No one mirrored back their soul quite like you did. And when people lose something that authentic, they spend months pretending it didn't matter, until the pretending collapses. That's when they come back, not to fix the past, but to relieve the pressure of missing you in silence. When that moment comes, stay calm. Don't gloat. Don't chase. Let their quiet entry remind you of one thing. You were never forgettable. You were unforgettable in ways that rewired them. You are their unfinished sentence. And no matter how far they run, every unresolved emotion eventually circles back to its source. So don't wait for the apology to sound perfect. The real apology is in their eyes, in their hesitation, in the tone that trembles when they finally say your name again. That's what guilt and longing sound like when they've run out of excuses. You were never chasing closure. You became it. Write it in the comments. They always return. Because energy like yours doesn't vanish. It pulls them back, not through magic, but through memory. And when they do return, you'll realize something powerful. You never needed them to come back to prove your worth. Their return is just the universe confirming what you already knew. You were the one they couldn't replace, the lesson they couldn't unlearn, the love they'll never forget.